Summary report of the Wehrmacht High Command on the second half of the year 1940 from January 2, 1941. The war year 1940 was a year of German victories. In just under 3 months, the English were driven out of Norway. Holland and Belgium were forced to surrender. France was wrestled to the ground after a hard fight. The English Expeditionary Army in Flanders was defeated, robbed of its weapons and equipment, and chased onto the ships. Since English propaganda tried to first deny and then belittle these unique successes of the German Wehrmacht, it has lost all credibility. In the end, however, they had to bow to the fact that Germany had broken out of the narrow North Sea base that was in danger of being blockaded and expanded it to an area that stretched from the North Cape to the Spanish border, and which made it possible to strike deadly blows against England itself. The Wehrmacht High Command presented the German people with summary reports on the events leading up to the conclusion of the armistice with France. Since the ceasefire with France was in effect, preparations for the fight against England began. While army divisions occupied the French Atlantic coast up to the Spanish border, cleaned the remaining bases of the Maginot Line, and sighted the enormous loot, the Navy and Air Force prepared to take up the fight against England. The Italian Wehrmacht was now tying down ever stronger British forces. The Navy quickly solved the difficult task of rapidly securing all captured enemy coastal areas from the Northern Sea to the Bay of Biscay, making the existing, partly completely destroyed port facilities usable again, putting the existing coastal defenses into defensive condition, and where necessary, installing new combat batteries. After the dangerous clearing and securing of the wider coastal apron, light naval forces immediately joined the fight. Their advances, carried out with particular boldness, were repeatedly carried close to the English coast. The use of naval forces in overseas waters was particularly successful. Wherever the enemy tried to stop the activities of the German merchant raiders, German warships fought sea battles from which they themselves emerged successful and fully operational, while the enemy had to abandon the battlefield with damage and losses and go to the nearest port. The enemy's naval warfare was constantly faced with new surprises. A considerable number of British warships fell victim to these combat operations by the Kriegsmarine in combination with Luftwaffe attacks. The Kriegsmarine sank 12 destroyers, 8 submarines, 9 auxiliary cruisers, 3 gunboats, 263 small war vessels, and the Luftwaffe sunk a total of 32 different units of the British Navy. The total tonnage of these sunk warships is around 190,000 gross registered tons. British merchant shipping felt the consequences of the new broad base close to England to an even greater extent. In cooperation with submarines of the Italian Navy, German submarines have continuously increased their success. The growing sinking rates are affecting the lifeblood of the British Isles. For the first time, enemy ships could be turned into prizes by commercial raiders in overseas waters and brought into German ports. At the same time, German combat and dive bombers inflicted heavy losses on the enemy through tireless attacks on British convoys and individual merchant ships. From Iceland to the northern coast of Africa, armed aerial reconnaissance monitored the Atlantic airspace and made the difficult work of German submarines easier through their reporting service at great distances. From June 25th to the end of the year, England lost of its own or usable merchant shipping space, 3,200,000 gross registered tons due to combat operations by the German Navy. Through combat operations by the German Air Force, over 700,000 gross registered tons. In total, over 3,900,000 gross registered tons. The results of mining operations, which extended into the most distant seas, have so far only been recorded to a small extent. Another loss for the enemy resulted from the damage to at least 264 merchant ships of over 2 million gross tons. These successes were achieved with only minor casualties of the Kriegsmarine. Since the 25th of June, they have amounted to 3 torpedo boats, 5 minesweepers, 8 submarines, and 12 smaller warcraft. Some of the ships that were lost were able to be raised and put back into service. Furthermore, the losses have not only been offset by the Navy's rearmament program, which continued smoothly, including the heaviest battleships. Rather, the Navy's overall effectiveness was significantly increased. Using all available means, the German Air Force launched a concentric attack on the British Isles in just a few weeks after the end of the campaign in France. Since May, the British Air Force has attacked German territory in night flights, almost exclusively hitting non-military targets. On August 8th, German retaliation began for a form of air warfare that Germany neither wanted nor initiated, even though all the advantages lay on the German side. Since then, German combat aviation units have dropped between 100,000 and 700,000 kilograms of bombs in over 130 large-scale missions. Although a series of enemy attacks against Berlin had already taken place, the first retaliatory strike against the British capital was not carried out until September 6th. Since then, London has experienced what was intended for German cities. Over 450 air raids and over 100 German attacks, some of them of the most massive scale, have destroyed the normal life of this city, destroying port facilities, docks, and supply depots. Since November 15th, German air raids have also extended to other centers of the British war economy. In 80 major attacks and 325 other attacks against important industrial facilities, British armaments, especially in the central English industrial area, were hit so hard that the loss of production for England assumed threatening proportions. In addition, 350 attacks against the most important port facilities caused serious damage to British imports and the performance of these import ports. Well over 1,000 small attack operations were directed against military targets such as airfields, troop camps, barracks, and anti-aircraft emplacements, against supply systems, fuel depots, storage facilities, power plants, and against transport facilities. During these almost continuous bombing raids, fighter and destroyer units challenged the enemy to air combat and inflicted heavy losses on him. With their escort, they secured the arrival and departure of the combat aviation units. Since June 25th, the enemy has lost about 3 times as many aircraft as the German Luftwaffe. Since the 24th of October, squadrons of the Italian Air Force had also successfully flown alongside the German units against England. Long-range batteries from the Army and the Navy repeatedly succeeded in destroying convoys that tried to sail through the Channel, causing losses to the enemy. Military targets in the Dover area and south of London were also targeted with good success. The enemy's long-range artillery returned fire only occasionally and without any effect. At home and in the occupied areas, fighters and anti-aircraft units repelled the attacks of the enemy, who almost only flew in the dark, when the weather was favorable and with small units. While the German Luftwaffe dropped over 43 million kilograms of high-explosive bombs and over 1,600,000 kilograms of incendiary bombs on vital targets in more than 2,000 attacks on the British Isles since August 8th, the bomb load dropped by the enemy was only around a 25th of these quantities. The majority of enemy bombs fell on residential areas, including 30 hospitals and military hospitals and 40 churches and cemeteries. The military and economic damage caused, on the other hand, is minor. The German war economy as a whole was not affected at all by it. Thanks to the exemplary attitude of the civilian population and all air defense organizations, all attempts by the enemy to inflict major damage to property and blood on the homeland failed. In contrast to the strict English censorship, neutral press representatives in Germany were given the opportunity to see for themselves the effect of the enemy attacks in the German cities that, according to the official English reports, were particularly badly hit. From week to week, English reports reported serious attacks on German cities on which no bomb was dropped and which were not even overflown. The fight against England continues. Its impact so far is far greater than can be seen from the outside. The year 1941 will prove this. Accustomed to victory and hardened for battle, the Wehrmacht looks back on a year of proudest successes. Confident of victory, stronger and better equipped than ever, it looks forward to the coming year. In contrast to the strict English censorship, neutral press representatives in Germany were given the opportunity to see for themselves the effect of the enemy attacks in the German cities that, according to the official English reports, were particularly badly hit. From week to week, English reports announced serious attacks on German cities on which no bomb was dropped and which were not even overflown. The fight against England continues. Its impact so far is far greater than can be seen from the outside. The year 1941 will prove this. Accustomed to victory and hardened for battle, the Wehrmacht looks back on a year of proudest successes. Confident of victory, stronger and better equipped than ever, it looks forward to the coming year.
Thank you for listening. Join us also for the subsequent Wehrmacht Blitzkrieg briefing about the Mediterranean theater and the front in North Africa. Subscribe to Major Antonio's channel. We'll get back to you next week. So long.